It was a very bright, if unseasonably chilly, that Paris morning in 1964, when mourners gathered in the church to pay their respects to me, master assassin and ex-Vichy official Colonel Jacques Bouvard, laid to rest. The coffin was draped in a flag, bearing a crest containing my initials JB. The priest circled the coffin with an altar boy, waving his thurible, the incense smoke wafting out of that metal censer as he intoned the requisite Latin. The grieving widow stood next to it, looking magnificent in her impressive fur-edged coat, dark gloves, stockings, heels, and a wide-brimmed hat, her face concealed behind a mesh. After the final words had been intoned over the coffin, she was accompanied to the limousine, waiting to take her home to her mansion. What no one outside a very small circle was supposed to know was that the grieving widow was actually Jacques Bouvard himself, Spectre number 6, and that my death had been deliberately faked. I opened the rear door of the limousine, tucking the skirt of my dress under me as I sat down on the seat, swung my exquisitely silk-stockinged legs in, and then relaxed as my chauffeur Marcel took the wheel and we glided away from the church. We had done it. Colonel Jacques Bouvard was dead. Long live Mere Bouvard. Extensive plastic surgery would be necessary to conceal my true identity, of course, but I was looking forward to my retirement as her. It hadn't been a big turnout, but I was gratified to see those who were present, including my fellow Spectre operative Irma Bunt. It was unusual for members of that organisation's top echelon to form close friendships, and yet we had. A short, stout, not very attractive woman, jowly and like me, in her mid-50s, Irma was an organisational genius. Blofeld, number 1, might come up with the grand plans, but she was the one who kept Spectre running smoothly. When Marcel and I arrived at the mansion, my butler was already awaiting us. As I got out of the limousine, he opened the door for us, and I entered, removing my gloves as I climbed the marble staircase, enjoying the sound my high heels made on the stairs as I ascended. Entering the upstairs drawing room, I locked the door behind me, removing my coat and draping it over the back of a chair, which is when I saw him. I stopped dead in my tracks as he rose from the armchair, tall, handsome, and pantherish. "Madam, I've come to offer my sincere condolences," he said as he approached. He sounded genuine, which is why I was caught off guard by his right hook, the force of his punch throwing me across my Queen Anne table. "My dear Colonel Bouvard, you shouldn't have opened that car door yourself," he said. I was already on my feet, and smashed the chair my coat had been on over him, immediately following up with a throwing knife. This just pinned his cuff to a cabinet, which he then brought crashing down on me. Lifting the cabinet from what he assumed was my unconscious form, my attacker tore off my hat, veil, and wig. But I was only feigning unconsciousness. Opening my eyes, I lashed out, toppling him and leaping to my feet. The fight that followed was one of the most brutal I've ever been in. It ended with me on the floor, his knee in my back, and him pulling with all his might on the iron poker he had across my throat. I felt something snap, and that was the last thing I knew until I woke up in a Spectre clinic 3 weeks later. "Don't try to speak," said Irma Bunt in that familiar German accent, helping herself to the grapes on my bedside table. When word that I had woken from my coma reached her, Irma was there the very next day. As for her warning, I couldn't have spoken if I wanted to. Not only had my would-be killer broken my neck, he had crushed my larynx too. "It's a miracle you survived," said Irma, "and if you hadn't received immediate emergency medical attention, you wouldn't have. Somehow, your spinal cord wasn't damaged, and your fractured vertebrae are healing nicely. Sadly, your larynx is another matter. Our surgeons will rebuild it as best they can and give you back your voice. But unfortunately, that voice is never again likely to rise much beyond the level of a croak. I'm sorry, Jacques. The whole incident was an important, very painful reminder that however much you try to cover every contingency and unexpected factor you hadn't planned for can always enter the equation and upend everything. You're in this clinic, under an assumed name. Only Blofeld and I am aware of your survival. Since we don't know for sure who betrayed you or who tried to kill you, this is for the best." Number 9 was suspected of being the traitor, and so was executed by Blofeld as a precaution shortly afterwards, having first been falsely accused of embezzlement. As for the nuclear blackmail plan number 2 brought in, I'm afraid a British agent and the US Marines managed to thwart that one, and Largo was killed. Not that that's something you need worry about for now. I've set up a new identity for you while you recover as Mère Brigitte Marceau, a widowed dressmaker. You were ready to embrace your cross-dressing proclivities as your own widow, so that seemed the way to go. Unlike Blofeld, Irma knew that more than cross-dressing was involved, that inside Jack was Jacqueline, wanting to get out. During the war, she said, I worked alongside Dr. Colonel Victor Krelmar and his assistant, Jacob Seltzman, on the development of a revolutionary device. Victor was a visionary genius, and what we were working on was nothing less than a means of switching the minds of two people. Had we managed to fully develop it, the device could have accomplished just that. Unfortunately, the war ended before he could perfect his process, and Victor Krelmar vanished. I believe Victor is still alive and still out there somewhere, and I'm on the alert for any sign of him. Because that machine was his life's work, and he would not have stopped working on it until he succeeded. If I'm right, and we can locate him and gain access to his device, you could become the woman you want to be, and me the Aryan goddess I should always have been. I hoped she was right, hoped more than I've ever hoped for anything, but it seemed like no more than pie in the sky. An impossible dream. I could not have been more wrong. Given the severity of my injuries, my recovery took a long time, but after leaving the clinic, I quietly lived a not unpleasant small-town life, awaiting the call. Eventually, 4 years after the attack that almost killed me, the call came. 3. I had long since settled into my role as a small-town dressmaker in northern France and had not used my other skills in years. Well, apart from that one time, I hunted down the degenerate scum who had been molesting local children, dragged him into the forest, and took my time slaughtering him. But I didn't consider this an assassination. No. That was vermin control. The summons was to a cafe in Paris, one on Avenue Victor Hugo. Looking down, which you can see the Arc de Triomphe in the distance. The cafe was across the street and maybe 50 meters up from the Centre International d'Assistance aux Personnes Déplacées. This was a building inside which various refugees and other displaced persons were being counselled by staff. Behind that facade lay Spectre's main headquarters, as I knew only too well, and it was being raided. As I walked by on the opposite side of the street, my 3-inch heels tapping a pleasing staccato on the stone slabs of the pavement, so 4 vans converged on the entrance to the Centre International d'Assistance aux Personnes Déplacées, and several large, heavily armed men in military gear leapt out. They stormed the building, followed by a woman in a chic coat, pistol in hand. Deliberately ignoring all this, I continued along the avenue until I reached my destination. Sitting at a table outside the cafe that gave her a good view of the building was a blue-eyed blonde beauty in her early 20s, smoking a cigarette. Stylishly dressed, she was almost impossibly beautiful. On the table in front of her were her cigarettes and lighter, a 2-year-old copy of Paris Match, by which my contact was to identify herself to me, and a bottle of wine with 3 glasses in front of it. Clearly, she had entertained someone else before my arrival. Ah, Jacqueline, she said in a throaty German accent, smiling as I approached. So good to see you again. She casually brushed aside a stray lock of hair, allowing me to see the signet ring she wore, one bearing the symbol of Spectre. You have the advantage of me, Imsel, I said, taking the chair opposite her and hating the raspy sound of my voice as always. Lena Ritter, she said. But you knew me better as Irma Bunt. Irma? No, it's not possible, I said. Oh, but it is. Victor Krelmar did perfect his process, and I'm the living proof. Ask me anything only Irma would know. Anything at all. So I did, and after a few minutes I was convinced. My God, it really is you, I said, stunned. It really is, yes, she said. Wine? I nodded mutely, barely able to take my eyes off her as she poured me a glass. What's it like? I asked, trying to imagine what it must feel like to have a new body. Beyond anything I could have dreamed it would be. I was never very fond of mirrors, but now, to see this gorgeous Aryan goddess in them, and she is me. Well, I can't stop smiling. I have spent hours just glorying in my reflection. Then there's being 30 years younger. I'm 21 again, taller, fitter, and I have so much more energy now than I did before. Can you believe this body's original owner was planning to take holy orders? Anyone who would hide away such perfection in a convent didn't deserve it in the first place. No. Far better for it to belong to someone capable of fully appreciating it. Someone like me. I'm so obviously much more worthy of it than that silly girl ever was. I was very self-conscious about the way I used to look, as you know, and had significant body image issues. Not any longer. Last night, I ended too many years of celibacy with the delicious Jean-Paul, and it was glorious. Seeing how her eyes sparkled at the memory of this, I found myself envying her. Still smiling, she took a final drag on her cigarette, then stubbed it out, before filling me in on everything that had happened over the past few years. Ernst Stavro Blofeld had my loyalty for 2 decades, she said. But as one after another his grand schemes were thwarted, I began to have my doubts. When he had us make an attempt on the life of James Bond, which succeeded only in killing Bond's wife, the daughter of Marc-Ange Draco, head of Union Corse. It was the final straw. In the wake of that fiasco, Blofeld suggested we go our separate ways and meet up again later, that we were so hot it was now dangerous for us to be seen together. First it was Hitler, and now another leader had let me down. Fortunately, a Spectre intelligence report I'd recently read gave me a new goal to pursue. It appeared that my old partner in crime, Dr. Victor Krelmar, had recently re-emerged and was now believed to be in the hands of a Hong Kong crime lord named Su Muru. The Spectre analysts who prepared the report had no idea of Krelmar's significance, of course, but if, as seemed possible, he had perfected his process, then I knew I needed to seek out this Su Muru. Obviously, you succeeded. As it happened, Victor had told her all about Irma Bunt and praised my organisational skills highly, so when I came to her 4 weeks ago, she welcomed me with open arms. We hit it off immediately. Su Muru had had her eye on the beautiful Lena Ritter as a possible body donor ever since Krelmar built another of his machines for her and decided we were a perfect match. So Miss Ritter was tricked into coming up to the Institute, where she duly donated her beautiful young body and her very identity to me. As a signing bonus, that's hard to beat. What of Spectre? I asked, unsure of my position in all this. Spectre, the old Spectre, is finished, and I'm helping it on its way. I told Su Muru everything about the organisation, and we plotted their downfall. I leaked the location of Spectre's executive headquarters to the British. Shortly before you got here, it was raided by Inspector Sophie Depardieu and officers of France's General Intelligence Directorate, and, it looks like the operation is over. She nodded in the direction of the Centre International d'Assistance aux Personnes Déplacées building, where a couple were emerging, the last people out following the raid on those premises. This was the pistol-toting woman I now knew must be Sophie Depardieu, and someone I recognised instantly. The man who almost killed me, I said, my eyes narrowing. So it was James Bond, said Lena, nodding. Interesting. I should very much like to return the favour. And you may get the chance one day, Jacqueline, but not today. For now, just take pleasure in the fact that someone he believed dead, and one of those responsible for his wife's death, are watching him, and he has no idea we're within such easy reach. Which brings me to the big question. Now that you've witnessed this, do your loyalties still lie with an organisation that's dying, or with someone who can offer you a new body and a new start? Well, when you put it like that, Spectre must die. The 4 of us seated around the table in the room nodded in agreement. We all realised the truth of this pronouncement from the woman standing at its head, Lena Ritter. When she had satisfied herself as to my loyalties, Lena had led me down into the café cellar where the others awaited us, all of them committed to her cause. On that we're all agreed, said the youngest of we 4, a sandy-haired man in his early 40s whose broad peasant features and Corsican accent set him apart from the rest of us. This was Antone Scarpetti, or rather his sister Angiolina in his body. Men unworthy of her had treated Angiolina terribly, her brother worst of all. After the switch she had strangled him to death, a death he richly deserved. The other pair were a thin woman in her mid-60s and an obese one in her mid-50s, both former Nazis. This was Heidi Dreisler and Helga Hauser. When will it happen? I croaked, having witnessed the raid but knowing Spectre wasn't done yet. Soon, I promise you, said Lena. Before that happens, you all need to go to ground to avoid being rounded up. After the dust has settled, I will reach out to each of you in turn. And we'll get what you promised us? Asked Heidi. If all goes to plan, Miss Dreisler, I'll give you the world. And what is the plan? Asked Helga. Word has been leaked to Marc-Ange Draco, the head of Union Corse, that his daughter's killer, Irma Bunt, has been seen in Hong Kong. And indeed, the former owner of this body is now trapped in that one, and currently in the custody of Su Muru. I'm still amazed that an English socialite is leading a double life as a Hong Kong crime lord, I said, shaking my head. That had been some revelation, nevertheless. Aurelia Goldfinger Minus, who's soon to become Lady Aurelia Wells, and Su Muru are indeed one and the same. Draco will take the bait, and bring men with him to Hong Kong to raid her base and capture Irma Bunt. I'll be with them and will betray him to Sumuru, said Antone. Then I'll take his place. Sumuru has a Krelmar mind-swapping machine at her Hong Kong base, so this will be easy to achieve, said Lena, whereupon Sumuru and Union Course will form an alliance. My idea, of course, and for my purposes, but she loved it. She's very pleased with my work overall, and very open to me bringing other ex-Spectre members to work for her, people like Helga and Heidi. You'll be there in Hong Kong too, when this goes down, ladies, and if all goes to plan, so will the young women I want you to replace, and they'll be donating their bodies to you. She then laid a fat dossier on Sumuru/Aurelia Goldfinger down on the table. Assessment? She said, turning to Helga, who, I knew, had been a top Spectre analyst. Sumuru, real name Susan Murphy, was the result of a liaison between a married British diplomat and his secretary. When they returned to the UK, they left the child behind in Hong Kong to be raised in an orphanage. As an adult, she used her considerable drive, intelligence, and ruthlessness to become the head of a significant criminal enterprise. Several months ago, she turned up in London claiming to be Aurelia Goldfinger, daughter of the late Auric Goldfinger, and heir to his various companies and enormous wealth. Her knowledge of those companies, the passwords to all their accounts and the like, eventually convinced the authorities she was who she claimed, even though we know she can't be. Conclusion? She knows things only Auric Goldfinger could know. The existence of the Krelmar device allows for the possibility, no, the probability, that despite having apparently perished, Aurelia aka Sumuru is actually Auric Goldfinger himself. Agreed, that was my conclusion too. Lena slid the file across the table to me. Study it well, Jacqueline, and memorize everything. When I call you, you have to be ready. 5 by the time the call came, a year had passed. During those months, Aurelia Goldfinger married Rupert Wells to become Lady Aurelia Wells. Following the events in Hong Kong, all of which had gone exactly according to plan, Lena Ritter had become engaged to Lord Peter Wolverton, eventually marrying him and so becoming Lady Lena Wolverton. So both she and Aurelia were now wealthy members of the British aristocracy. I was listening to the radio when the call came. The trial of Irma Bunt ended in Tel Aviv today, intoned the announcer, with the defendant pleading guilty on all charges. Sentencing is still to follow, but the death penalty seems almost certain to be imposed. I hadn't thought it possible that the real Lena Ritter could be brainwashed into believing that she had always been Irma Bunt, that her belief she was really Lena Ritter trapped in the older woman's body was no more than a delusion. But I had been wrong. The phone rang. It was Lena telling me to be at a certain place at a certain time where a car would pick me up. I was, and it did. Lady Aurelia Wells's Rolls-Royce had smoked windows to minimise the possibility of anyone being able to see inside, thus thwarting any would-be snipers. Conducting a job interview while on the move like this had its risks, but she was clearly confident of the loyalties of those in the car with her. What a shame that confidence was misplaced. Your credentials are impeccable, she said, reviewing the file Lena had prepared on me. I see you even count 2 British double-nil agents among your kills. Most impressive. Thank you, Lady Wells, I croaked. Ah, yes, said Aurelia, sympathetically. I gather your larynx was crushed when a British agent tried to avenge the death of his colleagues. If you give me exclusive use of your skills, we can do something about that. I'm informed you want a female body? I nodded. That should be easy to arrange. We'll find someone suitable, and in no time at all you'll be the beautiful woman you should always have been. We already have someone in mind, said Lena. We do? Said Aurelia, surprised. Yes, you. I struck quickly, clamping my arms around Aurelia. Charles, she shouted, expecting her chauffeur bodyguard to help her, but he did not react, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. Charles is with me, said Lena. I trusted you. I know you did, Aurelia, but what's about to happen has to happen. Charles drove us to a nondescript lockup beneath railway arches in Camberwell, leaping out to unlock the doors, then driving in, and parking the Rolls beside the transit van inside. On seeing it, Aurelia's shoulders slumped. You know where the Krelmar machine is, she said. Of course, said Lena. We could hardly pull this off if I didn't. Brilliant idea, by the way, keeping it in a van and frequently changing its location. I'll be sure to continue with that. Resigned to her fate, Aurelia didn't struggle, offering no resistance as she was strapped into one of the chairs and the helmet lowered over her head. When I was in the other and everything was ready, Lena activated the device. Start counting down from 10, Jacqueline, she instructed me. 10, 9, 8, I croaked, slowly finding myself no longer looking through one set of eyes, but two. 7, 6, 5, 4. I said somehow both myself and Aurelia, my tongue no longer just my own. 3, 2, 1, I finished, my voice clear and mellifluous, as I looked out through younger, sharper eyes. As soon as the transfer had taken place, Lena unstrapped us both, standing back as we got to our feet. I looked down at my new body in amazed delight, but Aurelia was far less pleased with her own. A man again at last, Goldfinger, laughed Lena. If you would please, Charles. Still marvelling at my transformation, I barely noticed, as the chauffeur took out a gun from inside his jacket, fitted a silencer, and fired a single shot. It hit his target between the eyes, Goldfinger immediately crumpling to the floor, his curly red wig coming off as he died to reveal the shaven head beneath. My wig, and what had been my shaven head mere minutes ago. R.I.P. Auric Goldfinger, murmured Lena. Shall I dispose of the body, ma'am? Asked Charles. No, leave that to me. You need to drive Lady Wells home. Lena turned to me. I was still smiling and running my hands over my new body, my fingers through my long hair. Are you clear on what you have to do now? She asked. I am. Yes, I replied. I was now Lady Aurelia Wells, at least for the next few hours. Then go. The Disco Verde was sister to the Disco Volante, the vessel Emilio Largo had used years earlier in the theft of 2 atomic bombs during the Thunderball affair. At the moment, she should be at anchor at pre-arranged coordinates in the English Channel. It was nearing dusk, and the sea was calm, but even though it had been a warm day, the water would still be cold. Sitting beside me in the light aircraft I was piloting was my husband, Rupert Wells. He had been quiet the whole flight so far. When we were 10 minutes out from the rendezvous point, I lashed out and broke Rupert's neck, killing him instantly. I then tucked my hair under a bathing cap and cut the fuel line to allow fuel to gush into the cockpit. Right on cue, maybe a mile ahead of me, pulsating lights appeared around the entire rim of the Disco Verde, highlighting the yacht. With my lighter, I set fire to a rag I'd brought along for that purpose. When we passed the yacht, some 50 yards off her starboard side and 10 feet above the water, travelling as slowly we could without the engine stalling, I threw the burning rag into the gushing fuel and bailed out. The plane burst into flames as I leapt from it, plunging into the dark waters below. The aircraft flew on for a considerable distance until, those surfaces that kept it in flight having been consumed by flames, the badly damaged craft plunged into the channel where it broke up, the remaining fuel burning on the surface for some time before the flames were finally extinguished by the water. Accident investigators should find the wreckage and possibly Rupert's body, but they'll never find Aurelia's, of course. Welcome aboard, said the powerfully built and stylishly dressed man who helped me clamber onto the small water-level deck at the rear of the Disco Verde. Mercy, I said, taking off the rubber bathing cap I was wearing, tossing it out over the water and shaking out my lustrous hair. So this was Marc-Ange Draco, formerly Antone, formerly Angiolina. You'll want to get out of those wet clothes, he said, and into the dry ones Lena brought along for you. Then she would like you to join us and the others in the main cabin below, which I did shortly afterwards. I was pleased at how I looked in the red Kyeongsam dress Lena had brought along for me. This is the first time we've all gathered together since we met in that cellar all those months ago, she said, as I joined the others around the table that filled the cabin, though mine is the only face that's the same. You know who everyone is, of course, even if their faces are new to you. Of course, I said, nodding to the shapely young women who had to be Heidi and Helga in their attractive new bodies. You look amazing, ladies. You too, said Helga, casting an appreciative eye over my lovely figure. Aurelia was planning to have them continue as Night and Gale investigations, said Lena, which would have been a criminal waste of their talents. So how did it go, Jacqueline? Any problems? None at all. Rupert Wells accepted me as his wife, and when I told him I needed him to fly us over to France, he complied immediately. I get the impression that theirs was a marriage in name only, and that she was more his boss than his spouse. I made sure that several people at the airfield saw us get into the aircraft and take off in it together. Superb work, said Lena. Aurelia Wells is and will remain dead. We'll smuggle you into Hong Kong where you'll take over her Sumeru identity permanently. As for me, I'll grieve the loss of my friends, attend their funeral, and assume responsibility for little Leonina. She is my goddaughter after all. And Auric Enterprises, said Draco. What of that? I'm CEO of Auric Enterprises European operations and Aurelia's obvious successor, said Lena. The board unanimously voting me into that position should be little more than a formality. If anyone raises any objections, well, we have ways of dealing with that. We then got down to business, plotting out the mergers and moves that would eventually bring us the financial power to move governments. At the end, or which Lena was very pleased with how things had gone. And now, she said, indicating to me that I should start, I'd like to go round the table with you, each announcing your new names and designations. Jacqueline Bouvard, soon to be Sue Muru. Number 6 in the old Spectre, I said, now Spectre number 2. Angiolina Scarpetti, currently Marc-Ange Draco, Spectre number 3. Emma Peel, formerly Helga Hauser, Spectre number 4. Kathy Gale, formerly Heidi Dreisler, Spectre number 5. Lady Lena Wolverton, now and forever Spectre number 1. Spectre is dead, ladies. Long live Spectre. Long live Spectre. We echoed. 7. That was the day the age of Spectre truly began, I thought as I gazed out over Hong Kong harbour, the sounding of ships' horns and the squawking of seabirds now comfortingly familiar sounds. I was reclining on the balcony of a suite in the colony's most exclusive luxury hotel, smoking a cigarette in a long holder and enjoying the feel of the sun on my barely clad young body. A penny for them, said a masculine voice, my lover coming over and sliding a hand beneath my negligee to fondle my left breast. That feels so good, I purred, smiling up into his attractively brutish features. So awake at last. Apparently so. I didn't think any woman could tire me out in bed, but you managed to. I was just thinking over how much has changed in the months since I took over as Sumuru, I said in answer to his question, and how much better my life is now. You've done Spectre proud, he said, as will you. Number 1 has high hopes for you, Milo. Hopes I intend to fully justify, he replied, leaning down to kiss me. It was a long kiss. Right, I'd better be going, he said, straightening up and padding over to the chair where his discarded uniform lay. After all, it wouldn't do for my superiors to discover a captain in Britain's parachute regiment is consorting with a known crime lord. Consorting? I chuckled as I watched him dress. I like that word. A shame it's the last time we'll get to consort before you set out for England. It's been fun, he said. And it had. So much fun. After Milo had gone, I realised that I still craved more of that fun. On the table next to the recliner was a telephone beside which was a little black book containing the numbers of several handsome hunks who were at my beck and call. At a word from me, they would drop whatever they were doing and rush to service my needs. I smiled as I contemplated that delightful menu. Being beautiful and powerful has its perks. I recommend it.